Welcome to the show. It's Wednesday and it's mailbag night. We've got a lot of questions started up and ready to go already. We have a new number one IB Nation Sports Talk co-host, and he's joining me tonight.
Hello.
The rankings are always subject to change, and Jesse has found his way back at the top again.
Let's go.
Coming into today's show.
I
So
want the people to know I have full power in this chat. If you're acting up, I'll mute you. If you're acting even more up, I'll kick you out.
let's see how long the ranking lasts, if he can hold on to that ranking through the entirety of the show tonight. I don't know where Vince is tonight. He's out doing something. I think John's there for
Some
you.
excuse.
So.
Vincent is it excuses.
Yep. Matt must have been here on Monday when I found out that there are actually two music buttons, for the little thing that plays at the start of the show to lead us in. And it went a little bit long. The music went a little bit long the other night, but we got it all figured out. I tell you what, man, if you live like in the Midwest, anywhere around here, you've experienced all four seasons in the last 24 hours. I don't know what it's like in Cleveland right now, but it was beautiful yesterday. Sunny, 70 degrees. We had snow and blow and wind and everything going here in South Bend today. So I don't know.
Yeah, I came into the office and I walked out of my house this morning and it felt really nice. And then I walked out of the office after work today and there was snow blowing around. So it was quite the difference in seasons. And yesterday was beautiful out. It was like 60 degrees out, had all of the windows open all day. It was tremendous. I know what I was going to ask you. Did you see the ending of that Cavs game last night?
Was that the one? Was there like a 3/4 court shot or something?
Yeah, at
like
the buzzer.
That? Yeah.
So the Mavericks were up 1. Cavs had the inbound sideline around half court. They failed to inbound, turned the ball over. The Mavs scored with like 2 seconds left, and then the Cavaliers hit about a half court shot at the buzzer to win the game. And this is all leading up to say I was there last night.
I was going to say, were you there last night?
I was there, and I was in the upgraded seats, courtesy to Naomi. We had tickets originally. And then one of her coworkers couldn't go and take the corporate seats, so we got corporate seats last night to see that game. And so we saw the half court winner in like HD, baby, up close and personal. It was nice.
Man, I tell you what, I just had a thanks for the mute button. Had a coughing attack, a sneezing attack, and the whole thing while you were telling. That was a fascinating story.
Thank you. It's funny though, because yesterday was so nice out. My spring allergy started for a day. I had to take an allergy pill yesterday. And now it's back to being cold today. That just shows the bipolarness of the weather in this area.
It's a lot of fun. Well, get your questions in. Let's just jump in with some right now. Sean Kelly has been in here for a while and got some questions in. Buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame will have a 1,000-yard receiver this season. Interesting question. Oh, man. I think.
This is like the long-standing debate.
We've been waiting and waiting.
I want to just look up some stats last year. I just want to see like who
nobody was close. Nobody was close, if that's what you're getting to. I mean, the closest we've had is Michael Mayer.
Oof. Tyree had 484 last season. Mm-hmm. So am I saying that Notre Dame's leading wide receiver is going to double that next season?
Well, some different factors. You've got a new quarterback.
Right.
You've got a new offensive coordinator who just had a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, a bunch of veteran wide receivers, Bo Collins from Clemson, Chris Mitchell from Florida International. I had to think of which Florida he was from. Florida International. He had over 1,000 yards down there. Of course, different level of competition. He's got a lot of speed, though. And you've also got some of these up and comers like Jaden Greathouse, Jaden Thomas. I don't know. We were so all in, like on Tobias Merriweather
I know.
last year, and look what it got us. Like I'm glad Vince isn't here tonight, because Vince I know would go over, because each of the last 2 years when we try to predict what the receivers are going to do for Notre Dame, Vince is like a million yards for everybody. You get a million and you get a million, and hasn't come close. I like the way this is phrased: buy, sell, or hold. Good
You're
phrase,
gonna hold.
Sean Kelly. I am going to hold. Let me at least look and see what things look like this spring before I make any big, rash decisions on what the receiving core and the passing game is going to look like. Because fool me once, I won't get fooled again.
So here's some preliminary thoughts from me on this question. I would say that arm talent, or maybe Sam Hartman was a better thrower of the football and a more experienced thrower of the football than Riley Leonard. But on the flip side, I think you're upgrading at offensive coordinator and scheme, and I think that goes a long way, especially at the college level, of just getting guys open and working in space. And I think for Notre Dame to if they want to accomplish what they want to accomplish next season in the playoffs and winning in the playoffs, I think you have to have 1,000-yard receiver. So I'm going to go ahead and buy this. I think that it's been long enough, and I think that I'm willing to take the risk at the upgrade at the offensive coordinator position and scheme, that's going to outweigh everything else.
And I just thought about this as well. I mean, look at the schedule they're
Right.
playing. They've got 2 MAC teams and 2 service academies on the schedule. Like, those are both like that's 4 games right there where you could be halfway to 1,000 yards if you have, someone with some big, so I'm leaning in that direction. But again, I need to at least see what things look like in the spring first to feel really because I was too confident last year, overconfident. And as DK said, on behalf of Salty, he's going with the great one for 3,000 yards this season. The great one's going to do a little bit of everything. Apparently, he's not just going to catch the ball. He's going to.
I think a more fun question would be, who would be the 1,000-yard receiver?
Do you have a prediction?
I'll
tell you what. Let's save it for Friday and let Vince get in on this.
Okay.
I'll write that down. Okay.
He's just going to pick 5 people. Everyone's getting 1,000 yards.
You're right about that.
I'm just going to save it. I'm just going to save it.
Okay. Benjamin wants to know what changes we're most excited to see in the upcoming spring and fall practices.
Linebacker. I'm most excited to see who steps up, because I think a young player is going to have to make an impact, whether or not that's Bowen, Osbury, or Sneed. And Sneed is almost a veteran at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But someone with not a lot of playing experience so far is going to be impactful at the linebacker level. And I think it's going to be very important for the defense as a whole. I just don't know who it's going to be. And then offensively, I kind of have to go back to what we were just talking about. Like, I think the line will be fine. They have a ton of talent. I think that Riley Leonard will do his thing with Den Brock. I think the running back room is loaded, lots of talent in there. There's going to be a good rotation at running back. So I would have to go, who's going to step up at wide receiver? Who's going to be the go-to guy? Is it going to be, Faison again? Is it going to be Chris Mitchell? Is it going to be, Jaden Thomas? Who's it going to be? So I look at linebacker and wide receiver. Who's going to prevail out of that position group? Who's going to stand out this season?
No, I agree. I think that's a really good one. On the defensive side of the ball, I think that is kind of the group to be looking at, because of the turnover that you've got losing those 2 veterans. You know what you're going to get with Kaiser, but you pretty much have Osbury and Sneed, and we're going to talk specifically about Sneed a little bit later in rapid fire. Actually, we've got some comments from Max Bulla on Jalen Sneed that we're going to have. But you've kind of got those two battling over there at Rover. Vince and I were talking the other night how it sure pretty much seems like it's probably going to be Drake Bowen as the Mike this year, but they also have the different, like in the nickel package we talked about it, the two linebackers. They have it's the Mac and the Money now are the two inside linebackers in the nickel package. And so what that kind of means is there's potential for some other guys in that sub package when they're in nickel, so it could look a lot different whether it's base package or nickel or obviously dime is going to look a little bit different. So I like that. And look, the offense is going to look different. This is going to be a different looking offense than what we've seen the last few years. You've got the most experienced offensive coordinator that you've had here at Notre Dame in a heck of a long time, and a guy who is completely running his own offense in Mike Denbrock. He was running Brian Kelly's offense and calling plays out of Brian Kelly's offense when he left here. He went to Cincinnati, kind of got to do his own thing, and by the time he got to LSU, he had made that offense his own, and he was doing his own thing down there. And we were just talking about the weapons that Mike Denbrock is going to have in that offense. I'm looking. That's the other thing that I'm looking forward to. Especially to seeing on the offensive side of the ball is what that all looks like, and obviously how Riley Leonard fits into that.
So this is actually interesting because I just remembered on the topic of Denbrock and wide receivers and 1,000 yards. I saw something the other day. LSU had 2,000-yard receivers last year. Malik Neighbors and I want to say Brian Thompson Jr. was the second. And so if that's any indication for the type of passing success that Denbrock wants to have, and you have to consider largely SEC defenses are probably going to be stronger than the level of defenses that Notre Dame might be playing next season. So I feel very optimistic about our 1,000-yard situation and what Mike Denbrock is able to do with wide receivers. To have two, I get it. You have Jaden Daniels and a Heisman quarterback, but that wasn't Jaden Daniels wasn't Jaden Daniels before last season, right? And so we're in the kind of the same predicament right now, or question mark. Is Riley Leonard and the gang going to be able to prove themselves this season?
Yeah, faux show. Well, so on the flip side of this, then, that's what we're looking forward to. DK wants to know biggest question mark for next year.
I know this sounds like probably maybe a little cliche or a little bit too easy of an answer, but to me, the biggest question mark is how Riley Leonard and Denbrock mesh together. I think that's we talked about what was the limiting factor of this Notre Dame team last season. They had a top 10 defense, a playoff defense. They didn't have a playoff offense, and so when you're rotating over a new quarterback and a largely new wide receiver room and keeping predominantly the same. I know there's going to be different guys amongst the offensive line, but the running backs are largely going to be the same minus Audric. I just think the biggest question mark is how well Denbrock and Leonard work together, right? Like obviously they have to work together, but how well are they doing it? Are they doing it at a Jaden Daniels Heisman level, or are they doing it enough to win games? Ultimately, I think that's the biggest question mark, how strong of a relationship that is.
To me, it's the offensive line because you're replacing two tackles, one who is definitely, they're both going to play in the NFL. With Fisher, it's a matter of where he's going to get drafted and what position he's going to play. Is he an NFL tackle? Is he a guard at the next level? And of course, Alt is potentially a top 10 guy. So that's the biggest question to me. And they've recruited well at the position. They've got sufficient bodies and all that kind of stuff. They looked good enough in the Sun Bowl, but Oregon State, just like everybody, he had a lot of turnover, but bowl opt-outs and all that different kind of stuff. So that's going to be the biggest question mark for me is just what the offensive line looks like, and specifically who steps up and how to what extent they step up.
So it's more so how it's pieced together for you. The pieces are there. It's just what the final kind of lineup, I guess.
Well, yeah, and you know they still have to go out there and perform. You know how it is with offensive line. The less you're talking about them, the better they're doing. Are we going to be talking about these guys, or are they just going to kind of go unnoticed? And are we going to be, nitpicking Mike Denbrock's play calling and nitpicking Riley Leonard and his completion percentage and all these different things like that? There's a big difference. If we're nitpicking, or not even nitpicking, if we're picking apart offensive line play, then that's a big issue. Because it is still a little bit with the offensive line that Joe Rudolph inherited last year. When you've got those two guys as your anchors on the outside, I mean that's a pretty good luxury to have. So for Joe Rudolph, now this is the first real opportunity that we're going to get to see in terms of how those guys were developed last year and how they're developed in this offseason to come in and be ready to step up and play. Because I don't think you can understate, obviously, how important it is when you're replacing both tackles at the same time.
Yeah.
Especially when they're the caliber that they were.
Side note, did you notice anything new about my appearance today?
Maybe a little trimmed up on the face, a little cleaner shaven.
Little fresh shave and no glasses today.
Oh, that's true. No glasses.
No
the
glare.
Coke bottles are gone.
You can see my eyeballs. I hope everyone appreciates that. I went and got my eye exam, and the best thing about the eye exam is you always walk out with a free pair of contacts, baby.
Nice. Very nice. Got in, got out, huh?
Very easy. It was actually the quickest eye exam of my life. I got like this 80-year-old dude who is just like, it looks like he's been doing eye exams for like 50 years. And he just got me in and out of there. I couldn't complain.
Sweet.
Ooh, I was hoping you picked this one.
Bench. Okay, we got a start, bench, or cut question. We got Darius Walker, Audric Estime, Ryan Grant. I know which way I'm going. Which way?
I do too. I'm going to start with cut. I think that's the most interesting one to start with. I would cut Ryan Grant. I would bench.
Let me just say, I agree with you. And this is for what they did at Notre Dame. Ryan Grant obviously went on and had a really nice NFL career. But remember, not that it was his fault, but he had the hamstring issues. He wasn't completely healthy when he was at Notre Dame. And so while he was good at Notre Dame, he was actually much more productive and had like some really, like peak seasons, especially when he was with the Green Bay Packers. When he was in the NFL, he had a better NFL career than I thought, just because of the fact that he went through the injuries when he was at Notre Dame. So I agree. I cut him for that reason. Estime obviously hasn't played in the NFL yet, but I'm just going based on Notre Dame career.
Yep. I would. This one was tough. I'd bench Audric Estime and I'd start Darius Walker.
Ooh, man. And I'm like on the fence. I'm going back and forth. Do I want the big guy?
What do you respect more? Do you respect that Audric Estime is a sure bona fide touchdown inside the 5, or do you respect that Darius Walker had 2,000-yard seasons and then had like an 800-yard in his other one? So like he was close in his other one.
Good receiver as well.
Yeah, and he had also a couple receiving touchdowns.
Versatility, yeah, the whole thing. So I think I've got to agree with you. I think I've got to, like, to me it's very close, but Walker just edges out because of the versatility and the overall track record of production that he had. Like, that would be a great thunder and lightning package, though.
Oh, man. We agreed, though. I love when that happens.
Yes. I really liked Ryan Grant. And, again, he didn't quite produce as much until he got to the NFL. There's a Ryan Roberts forehead wanted to know if I saw the video of Tom Hamilton's radio call. I did. Really good call. It was the Rajay Davis home run. in Game 7 of the Cubs Indians World Series. Some great stuff. Tom Hamilton, the Indian/Guardians radio announcer. Have you seen that MLB Network special that they did where they brought in Tito Francona and Joe Madden along with Bob Costas and Tom Verducci, and they did a whole they went through Game 7 of the World Series and like all the decisions that were made and all these different things that happened. Have you seen that?
I have not seen that.
You need to check it out. I recorded it, and I think it was Sunday after I got back from Boston that night. I went to bed, couldn't really get to sleep, and I was like flipping through the recordings, and I'm like, ooh, I got this. I'll just watch this for a little bit, and then I go to sleep. It was a 2-hour show. Obviously, you can forward through the commercials, which I did, so probably cut it down to what, like 90 minutes or something like that. But I
Yeah.
stayed up and watched the whole thing. So it was really good stuff. And obviously, you and Vince especially, is the kind of Cubs fans that you are. You got to see it. I think I told Vince about it. It's worth watching. Anthony wants to know, Jesse, now that you're a resident of Cleveland, will the Browns be your second team?
So this is tough because I have a gripe with this situation, to be honest with you. I want to say this lightly and respectively.
Ooh.
I'm not a fan of people who have like second favorite teams in this professional sports world. I live and die by my favorite teams. Am I a casual fan? Sure. I go to tons of Guardian games. I go to tons of Cavalier games. I go to a few Browns games here and there. I mean, the Cowboys are going to be in town next year, so that's definitely one that I will be at. But when it comes to professional sports, I think I stand by you live and die by one team. All of my energy and focus goes to my one team. Now, am I a fan of the game and do I enjoy, like with baseball, I think it's easier because many teams
like
come
baseball.
to town.
I've had multiple teams over the year,
The thing with like the Guardians is like, even though I'm not technically like a huge Guardians fan, I still get to see the Yankees come to town, the Angels come to town. I just seeing the amount that the players come to town. That's what I'm more interested in as a fan of baseball, is just the ability to go and see the players, some of the best players in the game. So that's more of my fandom on that side. And not to get off on a tangent.
No, that's okay. And I tried, like when I was in college, when I got out of the Army, a longtime Cowboys fan, and I had actually kind of like, I wouldn't say that I wasn't like buying Cleveland Browns gear or anything like that, but I've said before, I liked the Browns in the 80s, like back to Sam Ratigliano and Brian Sipe and the Cardiac Kids Browns, that era. It's like late 70s, early 80s, and it kind of started because like they'd play the Raiders in the playoffs and I couldn't stand the Raiders, so I kind of so I kind of liked the Browns back in the 80s. And then Marty Schottenheimer took over, and then like they couldn't get past the Broncos 2 years in a row in the AFC Championship game. They end up firing Marty Schottenheimer. He goes to Kansas City. They had been horrible forever. And then I get out of the Army, go to college, and all my friends are Chiefs fans. And then Joe Montana comes over, and it's like, ooh, Joe Montana's here now. So I kind of tried it. I tried it out for a few years, like with the Chiefs as my secondary team. And it was kind of along the line, after they fired Marty. Look, I was a Marty fan. I like Marty Schottenheimer. I like run the ball and play defense. Okay, sue me. So, and about that time, I just said, look, I'm a one team guy. I don't have time to invest, all this time.
That's what I mean.
In two different teams. I'm a one team guy. I've got a college team. I've got a pro team. That's going to be it.
I would like to debunk this DK lies, slander being thrown out there. I did not have my face painted for any Browns game this season. That did not happen.
Never once, right?
Never once. I might have had on a Browns jersey that a friend let me borrow at some point, but I will say, I know I did this for certain. I can't remember what game it was. I know who the Cowboys were playing. The Cowboys were playing the Panthers, and I wore an Emmitt Smith jersey and a sea of Browns uniforms, tailgates. So I held my end of the bargain. I was wearing my Emmitt Smith jersey.
Yeah, I think this is true. Andre asking for a whiteboard. No whiteboard tonight, Andre. Sorry about that.
Yeah, on a mailbag, likely not going to happen.
Yeah.
Sorry to disappoint.
No whiteboard on a mailbag night. Ronnie asking a recruiting question. I don't know if Ryan is still hanging around or not. Ronnie saying, Damian Shanklin look a little bit shaky. Is there another defensive end the Irish should focus on? If so, who would that player be? Again, like we're not the recruiting experts. That falls on Ryan.
I wish I
and
had
Brian.
time to get into all the recruiting, but unfortunately,
I know.
I don't.
So if Ryan pops in, he can give us his 2 cents on that. Otherwise, all apologies. You'll have to you have to wait for a recruiting mailbag. There was one that I was just looking at. There was actually a couple. I'll go ahead with this other one from Andre. He wants to know if we think that the women's basketball team needs to win the last 2 games against Louisville and Virginia Tech. He says, I think they do. Plus added some needed confidence too. Like,
are we talking to hosts?
Yeah, I mean,
to be a top 16. Is that what we're talking about?
There's a couple different things here. If they're going to get a top 4 seed at the ACC tournament, they absolutely have to win these last 2 games. They're in a 4-way tie for 3rd place right now. Top 4 seeds get the double bye at the ACC tournament, which is next week. I mean, it literally is like a week away. So they've got to do that. And I think if they do that and they end up a top 4 seed, I think it's an either or. If they do that, or they run the table and win the ACC tournament, I think if they do one of those 2 things, because they need some quality wins here down the stretch, I think if they do one of those 2 things, they'll be hosting NCAA tournament games. So he didn't specify like what specifically they need to do this for, but for them to host and obviously to be, I think they do one of those 2 things, they'll be hosting NCAA tournament games. Go ahead.
So I think that's the way I took it as well. I do think that if they want to host, they have to win both of those games.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if they win both of those games, they're going to end up probably doing better in the ACC tournament. And so I think both of those things kind of go hand in hand. What else I was getting to, though, is there was kind of some upsets this past weekend in the ACC, or amongst the top of the ACC. And North Carolina, who Notre Dame beat on the road, they ended up upsetting someone this last weekend. I can't remember if it was Louisville or Virginia Tech. They lost. But what I'm getting at
Louisville lost to Virginia.
That's what it was. And so what I was getting at with this is, most of the time, when you think of upsets, you think that it's going to help Notre Dame, but really, it didn't really help Notre Dame. I think it kind of congested the pack, because some of those teams, the not lower level, but the teams that were the underdog, essentially kind of gained a spot, and it put them in kind of like that middle tier that Notre Dame and a lot of other teams are sitting at right now in the ACC. And so rather than kind of freeing things up, I think it actually congested some things. But Notre Dame is in charge of their own destiny. And I think that's the best thing about this, is there's 2 games left and they're in charge of their entire destiny. They can take control of the situation.
They're fully capable of doing it. And I mean, Virginia Tech is a good team, but someone on the boards had a question about, the slow starts that the women have had lately. And I think that there's a lot of different reasons for it. But as I pointed out, and I've mentioned on this show quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, the ACC is just so deep this year. Like Virginia just knocked off Louisville. Like, I think it was, I don't even remember how long, but when we were at Virginia, I think it was like the weekend before the UConn game, Notre Dame beat Virginia, goes and then went down and beat Wake Forest. But Virginia at that point didn't have an ACC win. 6 weeks later, they've got 6 wins in the ACC. One of them was over Louisville last weekend. And then you look at Virginia Tech, who has already locked up the regular season championship and the number 1 seed. They've only got 2 losses in conference play, Florida State and Duke. And Notre Dame has beaten both of those teams on the road. So like that, the conference is just, it is so tough this year. There's just, again, fans got used to watching the Notre Dame women just run over everybody for years in the ACC, but the conference is in just a completely different place right now between the level of coaching in the conference and the level of recruiting that they're doing and the kind of players that they've got. But, here's the thing. Notre Dame has done really well against Virginia Tech the last couple of years. Virginia Tech went to the Final Four last year. Notre Dame beat them out there at Virginia Tech. That's Virginia Tech's last loss, December of 2022. They've won 25 straight home games since then. Now they're going to come in, obviously, to Notre Dame looking for something tomorrow. I think this is a big kind of prove it game for Virginia Tech, because as for everything that they've done in the last year and a half, beating Notre Dame is something that they haven't done. And they've got the two-time reigning conference player of the year in Elizabeth Kitley. She's averaged a double-double over the last 3 years.
That's
and
insane. That's
and a
an
really good
stat
point guard in Georgia Amore. They've got two really good players. And it's not all about just limiting Elizabeth Kitley in this game. She had a monster double. She had 20 rebounds against Notre Dame last year.
I was going to say, Kitley is going to do her thing. That you just kind of have to.
She's going to get hers. One. It's how you limit. Right. I think you got to limit more and the supporting cast. That's right. That's right.
It's funny that you said how good the ACC is this year in women's basketball, because I compare it to the Big 12 in men's basketball. There's just so many good teams with the addition of BYU. Cincinnati, Houston, all these new teams in the Big 12 this year. It's the men's side has been some really good basketball, and I think it's largely kind of reflected around Kansas. To be honest with you, when's the last time you saw Kansas with this many losses? And I don't think Kansas is bad. I don't think they're as good as years past, but with this Big 12, you can't go more under the radar, and I think Kansas has kind of found that out this season.
Tell me about it.
I had a buddy that lost. Well, and what was even crazy is that loss at home, because they don't even when they're they don't lose at home. So to lose that game against BYU, I think I saw a stat that they were 70-0 at home when leading at halftime or something like that. And
without McCullough right now, that's big.
That is what it is.
Yeah. That's big. Benjamin, the NCAA has given you the power to change 2 things in college football. What are your 2 changes?
Okay,
I've got.
I'm going to have fun with this.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to eliminate the kickoff. And instead, I think that you can either risk giving the ball to the team on what's a touchback again right now in college? Is it the 25 or the 30?
25. Yeah.
You can either this is going to sound crazy. You can either give the ball to the team on the 35 or the 25, keep it the same, no question, or you can allow your kicker to try to hit the crossbar on the kickoff for 2 extra points. But if you miss, the team gets the ball on the 35, not the 25.
Do you remember my proposal? I think that you were here when I proposed a 3rd bar in the middle of the uprights.
I heard this.
Yeah, my proposal is you put a 3rd bar that is right down the middle in the field goal uprights, and if the kicker hits the 3rd bar, that middle bar, you get, it was either 4 or 5 points, basically. Basically, you get an extra point for hitting the 3rd bar.
I like that. We're basically on the same page on that one.
Yeah. That's not my big change my 2 changes would be, first and foremost, get rid of the ejection on the targeting call.
That's very practical.
Because it's far too subjective. If you do it the first time in the game, it's just a 15-yard penalty. If you do it a second time, then you can have an ejection added on, and it's a 15-yard penalty, obviously, as well. But I think that there's just such a subjective nature to that call, and even the replay booth is not completely, you know, synced up with what's going on the field. I think it's ridiculous the way it's legislated. So I think you've got to get rid of it. Just make it 15-yard penalty for the first offense. If you do it in the second, if you do it a second time in the same game, then it's an ejection after that. You like that?
Okay. I do like that one. Very practical one. And a lot of people are bringing up overtime. That's another good one. I just don't know what the right model would be, right? And so
I'm changing my second one. The overtime rule might be my third or fourth. My second rule the second thing that I would change is the replay system, because right now in college every play is reviewable by the booth, and again I don't think the replay booth is it's not up to the same standard as the NFL. Again, they're too subjective with the way that they look at things. Sometimes it's basically just replacing opinion on the field by the officials making the call with opinion in the booth sometimes. And I would just rather see the NFL replay system adopted. Coaches have a challenge flag and you get X amount of challenges and that's it. Not every play, not because again, pace of play and all that kind of stuff too. You want to get the calls right, but I think that you need to just put it on the coach, actual challenge system, just like the NFL. The NFL's got it, and it's a much better system than what they have in college football.
I agree. I gave you guys a fun one, so I'm gonna give you my get off my lawn one now. Um, Halftime. I know everyone's gonna yell at me about the bands and the band's got to play and all this stuff. It's too long. It's too long.
I
I
agree.
don't need that long. Just I love the NFL, baby. You go in, you take a pee, and you're right back on the field. I need that same thing at the college level. I don't, and I know it's great for fans. You can get up, go to the concessions, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do. I just hate how long college halftime is. I could watch another quarter of football by the time or college
I
football
know.
halftime is over.
I know. NFL, man, it's like bada bang, bada boom. You're in, you're out, you're back on the field and ready to go. Love it. Ryan Roberts' forehead. Did we see Virginia Tech baseball taking shot at Iowa football's offense? He said they won 14-6 or something like that and tweeted, just like Iowa's offense.
Did not see it, but I love it.
Yeah.
Any opportunity to take a shot at that horrible offense is absolutely deserved.
Tyler, thanks for the super chat. He wants us to give the teams that we can't stand in every sport.
I'll start with the NFL. Cannot stand the 49ers and Packers.
It's a shame that Brent's not here for this. Mine's the 49ers and the Eagles. The Packers.
Damn, I gotta admit mine.
Packers are they've always, because I've got a couple friends who are Packers fans. I sort of had a soft spot, and I like
they
Brett
kill
Favre
the
back
Cowboys in the playoffs.
I know. It's like they've moved into that place. They've moved, like after this year, they've moved into that.
The Dez catch game, the Rodgers game at home. And then this past season, it's just every time the Cowboys actually make the playoffs, it's the Packers getting rid of them or the 49ers. Mm-hmm. But you bring up a good point with the Eagles. I hate playing those dirty birds twice a season.
That's right.
And they're fans.
Yeah. I don't disagree. Baseball, it's the Yankees. I've never been able to stand the Yankees. And that's why I've all, like we were talking about, two teams and stuff like that, even though I was a Royals fan growing up, like the Red Sox were always kind of there as well, because like when I was young in the 70s, the Royals and, were losing to the Yankees in the playoffs every year for the right to go to the World Series. And so because, the Red Sox were also the Yankees' rival, I kind of, grew fond of them just because that was their biggest, like not the enemy of your enemy or whatever, but they were the Yankees' rival. So that's kind of where I, not jumped on the Red Sox, but you know what I'm saying. I hate the Yankees. That's what it comes down to.
Here's where I stand with baseball. I absolutely hate the Yankees, but the Cubs don't play them enough. They don't see them enough for me
Right.
to like really care about them. Like I'll always like my favorite thing is, and like I don't know if you've seen this before, but when they do the national anthem at some ballparks at the very end, you know who some good baseball fans are when they say "and the Yankees suck" at the end of the national anthem. I love that. And so like I'm always rooting for the Yankees to be bad type situation. But if I had to pick the teams I dislike the most, it'd be the St. Louis Cardinals at number 1. Again, a divisional opponent. And the thing about the Cardinals is they just think they're better than the Cubs all the time. And every season they're projected to win the division. Every season the Cardinals are projected to win the division.
They've been a better run organization over a pretty long period.
That's fair. That's completely fine to say. That's completely fine to say. But they, again, I just don't like they're just in terms of this division, they're just always seen as the golden child. The Cardinals can never do anything wrong type situation. And then I got to throw in the White Sox as well. Crosstown rival.
Yeah.
I hate the White Sox. I hate being in that stadium. I hate their fans. I hate them.
Like being in this area, like listening to so much of the stepchild stuff, it's really it's just nauseating, and I can't stand the White Sox either for that reason. And I've me, like I've always liked the Cubs. I'm not a diehard Cubs fan like
You're only a Cubs fan because I like the Cubs.
Well,
you took me to Cubs games.
But look, I grew up, again, not like being a diehard Cubs fan, but I grew up not in this area back in the days of the Superstation when we could watch the Cubs on WGN, in Kansas, and like, so I grew up on Harry Carey and Steve Stone and the whole thing, and just kind of having fun, at the party that was Wrigley Field and all that. And, so when we moved here, it was easy to take you to Cubs games. So it was a lot of fun. College football. Who do you hate the most? Who can you not stand the most in college football?
Michigan's number 1. Well, I take that back. USC is number 1. And then it's Michigan, and then it's Ohio State. If Notre Dame still played Michigan every season, I'd tell you the answer is Michigan, but they don't play them every year now. I go with the long-standing rivals of USC, and I just remember growing up, and USC was better than Notre Dame. We're in an era now where Notre Dame has been better than USC,
right.
But in the era I grew up, and when I was going to all those games, USC was good, and their fans knew they were good. And every year they'd come into South Bend, and they talk so much trash, but the thing about them is they're really not that mean of people. Like, they're just good fans. You know what I mean?
That's true. I mean, we're getting the pretty much standards here. Michigan, USC, Ohio State. Do you put Michigan State in that group?
Nope.
Or
I like Michigan State.
Just because you hate Michigan even more? Like, their fans, though, can be pretty nasty, too. Because I remember hearing some stories when Notre Dame was playing up there in East Lansing every year, like people trying to go to the restroom, and, like people, Michigan State fans basically trying to start fights with them just because they were wearing a Notre Dame t-shirt and stuff like that.
Didn't know that.
I suppose that happens everywhere, once you get a little, in you. But
maybe that's why Notre Dame, well, there's other reasons why they don't allow alcohol in the stadium, but that has to play into it.
Yeah. As a University of Kansas alum, I've got to go K-State Wildcats, I think, as well.
I think that's so funny because your sister went to K-State.
Well, and the even funnier thing is, we lived in Manhattan for 5 years when we were young, and I was a Kansas State fan at that point, and she was a KU Jayhawks
and then
fan.
You switched.
And then when we got older, she ended up going to K-State. I ended up going to KU, and I generally just kind of like never really gave K-State much thought, but they, they're very much like Purdue and Michigan State. They've got a stepchild complex, and just
I think that
they're just obnoxious. I just have come to the point where I can't with them. So
someone brought up Boston College. I think that's fun too, just because they're big stepchild vibes in terms of like the Catholic hierarchy. You know what I mean? They want to be the premier Catholic school, I
Yeah.
feel like, and they're not as good at sports as Notre Dame is.
Right. They want to be, but they're not close.
That was a fun question.
Yeah, I think so. Connor wants to know the differences in Kelly versus Freeman's first 2 years as head coach. Also, the fact Kelly had 30 extra years of head coaching experience comparatively.
I think the thing that sticks out the most to me in this question is just the way that Marcus Freeman, because head coaching, I'm not going to get into that. That's pretty subjective of X's and O's and that sort of stuff. I want to talk about the stuff that we see, right? Because we don't see everything, especially and you, Vince, Brian, etc. You see more than me and probably likely everyone else in the chat right now. And so I think the biggest differences is Marcus Freeman's ability to speak with the public and his relationship with his players. And I think those two things are very evident, though. Just the way Marcus Freeman articulates himself to the media, to the rest of the world, he's a very likable guy. It felt like Brian Kelly did not want people to like him type situation. Like he was intentionally trying to get people not to like him. And I don't think Marcus Freeman is above the top, and I don't think he's fake. I think that's genuinely who he is, but I think he's just a genuinely great person. And so, and then that again, that leads into his relationships with the players. I think guys actually enjoy playing for Marcus Freeman more and trust Marcus Freeman more than they did Brian Kelly.
I agree. And I mean, the way Connor worded this, there are a lot of different ways that you could go at it. Like he said, the fact that Kelly had 30 extra years head coaching experience, which is true. So, like, if you're comparing records and you're saying, well, Marcus Freeman has a better record because he's like, what, 19-7 compared to 16-10 for Brian Kelly in their first, so if you're only looking at wins and losses, that's fair. But if you're going to be completely fair, you also have to say, well, Brian Kelly was inheriting a situation where that 30 years at that point, I don't think it was 30, but all that track record he had of being a head coach, it was needed because he needed to rebuild the foundation of the program. A lot of like the developmental model had to get better. And that's what Brian Kelly did. He changed the developmental model at Notre Dame, where and there was much more consistent recruiting as well. But I think what you're talking about, Jess, is like the program. I think even though Marcus Freeman has had his slip ups, like Marshall, Stanford, and I think you can include Louisville in there as well from this season, and even Clemson to an extent, because Notre Dame should have been a better team than Clemson, even though those were both road games. Marcus Freeman is viewed in a much different light. The recruiting thing is the biggest thing that stands out. Like Brian Kelly, even by year 12, was never going to be the point man in recruiting. And when we've talked to some of these players over there at Notre Dame who are coming in the door as early enrollees and were just recruits a couple of months ago, some of their position coaches have moved along, but they say they never wavered in their recruitment because of the fact that Marcus Freeman was still one of the first people who was making contact with him, and they had a relationship with the head coach. And recruits didn't have that relationship with the head coach previously. So that to me is the biggest thing, is the kind of guys that Marcus Freeman is bringing in the door, the kind of staff that he has put together. It seems like a much more cohesive staff where it's not the cult of personality, like he's like Brian Kelly had to be everything, in terms of the program. I don't think that it's like that with Marcus Freeman. It's just there's a completely different aura and a completely different feel around the program. So I hope that answers the question. Yeah. Because again, like the way the question was worded, I think there were a lot of different ways we could go with it. Well, Jess, we've been at this for a while. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I've been ready all day, actually.
All right.
Ever
Well, I'm
since
gonna
11:42 a.m. when I got the topics, I was ready.
Is that when they came through at 11:42?
That is.
All right. Well, I hope that I can suit your needs with this one. We're going to start off with some comments from Max Bull, or a comment from Max Bulla, the Notre Dame linebackers coach. When we got to speak to him recently, we asked him how he's going to be able to get the most out of Jalen Sneed's ability. Of course, Jalen Sneed, linebacker, going into his third season, his junior season at Notre Dame. And here is Max Bulla's response.
He's someone that's really gotten a lot better since I've been here. You know, I mean, it's for him. It's just, and he knows this. It's just how can I maintain a high level of focus? Because when he's locked in and he's focused and he's in the meetings, paying attention in practice, not worried about school or anything, he's great. He's in a great stance. He's got great eye control. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's a really smart kid. To him, it's 100%. Can I maintain that level of focus throughout the duration of whatever it is? Whether it's school, whether it's whatever, it doesn't matter. When you come out here, it is what it is. For him, that's his biggest thing. Day after day, day after day. Consistency.
Consistency, Jesse. So what's it all mean to you?
Yeah, I didn't draw to the word consistency. I drew more to the word focus.
Sure.
Kind of listening to Max Bulla in that soundbite, I guess. Yeah, sorry. I got caught up in a word that was really not necessary. But again, focus is the main word that drew me in there, because what that says to me is he can't consistently get the finer details right. He can't. It just sounds like he doesn't know the playbook completely. He doesn't know that, people are gonna call me crazy here, but like if he's probably lining up a half yard here, a yard here, but that's all the difference as a linebacker. That's either getting to the tackle or not getting to the tackle. So you need to know your alignment. You need to know what you're reading, all of those things. And so when we talk about focus, it sounds like some days he's really locked in, right? Like he gets everything. He knows exactly where he's supposed to be. He knows exactly what his reads are.
Let me answer this for DK. We're talking about Jalen Sneed. DK, we're on Jalen Sneed. I think DK got distracted there for a second. Go ahead, Jesse.
But yeah, it just seems like some days he's locked in. He knows exactly what he's doing in practice. He knows I need to be here. I need to check into this. This is this coverage. This is this run read. And then the next day it comes out and it's like, well, Jalen, where did you go? Like, yesterday you did this all perfect, but today for some other reason, your mind is here, your mind is there, and you're not focused in on what you need to do on a consistent basis. So that's what drew me in from those comments.
And look, when you're in high school, you can get by on being a really great athlete, and which is what Jalen Sneed is. And you don't have to be assignment perfect. And you've been there before, where I don't think that when you guys were in high school, you guys drilled down on perfection to assignments all the time.
There was like no assignments.
Right. And you can do that in high school. You can get away with that when you're a great athlete like Jalen Sneed. But this is a completely different level now. And you've got to be locked in on the finer points. And I think that that's just it for him. When you listen to him, and we've heard Marcus Freeman talk about him before, I think that's it. It's just like you can't just rely on being a great athlete now. There's so much more that goes to it. And we've seen this with guys before. Like we used to hear Brian Kelly, there were different receivers that we heard him talk about this with. But to me, the biggest example of this is Louis Nix. Like Louis Nix, for his first couple of years, you heard the same kind of things. Like he just wasn't focused. He just wasn't bringing it play in, play out, day in, day out at practice, and that held him back. But when Louis Nix finally locked in 2012, he was a great nose guard for a team that made it all the way to the national championship game. And I think that it just sounds like it's the same kind of thing with Jalen Sneed. You can't just rely on being a great athlete. You also actually have to you have to know your assignments and bring it, play in, play out. And once he does, I think that he can be a great contributor for this defense.
Sorry. Little man got caught up. The only other thing that I would add to this is just speaking from personal experience. My freshman year when I came into college football, I was amongst the freshman linebackers. There was a good group of us, like 5, 6. I can't remember the exact amount. In terms of speed, overall fitness, I wasn't not fast. I wasn't not fit, but there were guys faster than me and more fit than me. And by the time spring ball was over my freshman year, I was the top linebacker in the group battling out for, basically a second string spot on the depth chart. And I got that because I could line up right. They could trust me to be out there, line up right, set the strength right, get us overall as a defense in the right position, and I could still make plays. You know what I mean? But that was just because I knew what was going on. I knew what my reads were, where my alignments were, where I needed to be to best set up myself, and the rest of the defense. And so it just goes to show that, yes, Jalen Sneed could be the most, freak athlete on the field, but it doesn't do anything if you don't know where you're supposed to be on the field.
Right. Exactly. Completely agree with that. So, Jess, at a time when Notre Dame's relevance has been brought into question, it's interesting that Notre Dame currently has 7 players on the roster who are the sons of former NFL players. The Irish also have 3 other commitments from the sons of NFL players. Arizona State grad transfer Jordan Clark is one of them. Of course, he is the son of Ryan Clark, who just actually signed a new contract with ESPN. But here's what Jordan Clark said recently when he was asked about, what do you think it is that so many sons of former NFL players are coming to Notre Dame?
Before, this is like the school that all of our dads grew up watching. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? This place is the mecca of college football. And I think that anybody who's played football at a high level, outside of the brand, when they walk into the building, they see the attention to detail. They see Coach Golden's ball disruption chart. They see how involved Coach Free is with his players. They talk to the position coaches and they hear the knowledge that they have, and they want their children to be in a position to be able to do the things that they did and be able to chase their dreams.
So again, that's Jordan Clark, former Arizona State. Here's the list of current guys on the roster who are the sons of former NFL players. You got Jordan Clark, R.J. Oben, the Duke transfer, Kennedy Urlacher, Bryce Young, Benjamin Morrison, Rocco Spindler, and Howard Cross. And you also have commits from James Flanagan, Ivan Taylor, and Elijah Burris. And they're still working on Jerome Bettis Jr., of course. So you hear that, Jesse? What do you think about all that?
I think Clark brings up a good point of Notre Dame is the mecca. And I think the most important thing that he brought up there is, when all of our dads were going through it and coming up, that's likely where they wanted to go. Like, Notre Dame was a premier destination, and I still believe that they're a premier destination in terms of, I know that the national championship success hasn't been there, but that's a lot of people blow team success at the college level, because you still have to think of it as the minor leagues to the college football. Like, of course you want to win national championships, but on an individual selfish reasons, you're still thinking about what's the best path for me to go on to the NFL. And so when Notre Dame sits down and you see all pro, Hall of Famers, college all pro guys, like, there are still a ton of individual success at Notre Dame, and then you add on the degree that you get, and I think that whole package is ultimately what makes Notre Dame the premier destination. Is they are very well highly regarded in terms of the academic world and the status of what your degree can do for you, and then you add on, again, Notre Dame's long lineage of guys that go on to the NFL. I just still think it makes it a premier destination. You can't get wrapped up in team success and what is a very much still individual, sport. These guys are going on to the NFL as an individual.
And I think that it's interesting hearing him say this because, like, of all the guys that I just rattled off and the names that I just rattled off, I mean, some of the oldest, like Howard Cross and R.J. Oben's dads are kind of in the middle. Like Bryce Young's dad, Bryant, is one of the older ones, and Jerome Bettis, two of the older ones in that group, like late 40s, pushing early 50s, kind of in that range. But you've got, like, it hasn't been that long since Brian Urlacher's dad retired, and like Elijah Burris, his dad retiring. Like, so to hear him talk about this is the Mecca, like our dads grew up with Notre Dame. It's not that long ago for some of these guys.
Yeah.
And, again, so like when you see none of these, not none, just a couple of these guys actually had dads who went to Notre Dame. Most of them are not. And to see so many of these guys coming here, I do think a lot of it has to do with who's recruiting them as well, and like the fact that, they're able to get them. But again, I think that there's just a different image that these guys have, and Notre Dame still means something, so again, like when you apply it back to all that garbage that was going on last week about relevance and everything else, it means something to these guys, which means that there is a lot of relevance that comes with going and playing football and going to school at Notre Dame. So it means something.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're 57 days and counting away from the NFL draft. You may have heard the Chicago Bears have the number 1 overall pick, and they've got to decide whether or not they're going to keep Justin Fields or trade him, or keep the number 1 pick or trade it. Bears general manager Ryan Poles says a decision on that is coming soon. My question to you, do you buy or sell that decision is going to make or break Poles' career?
This is a tough one because you're ultimately judged basically at the quarterback position. It is
just to confirm, Michael Campbell, Benjamin Morrison was on that list of guys that I read. You might not have heard it, but he was on that list.
I heard it.
But thanks for Daryl Morrison, the dad of Benjamin Morrison. Go ahead, Jess.
So remind me again here. Was Justin Fields in the Mahomes draft class?
No.
Okay. That was going to be a big part of my kind of
Mitch Trubisky was the Mahomes draft class.
Mitch
actually.
Trubisky. Okay.
Yes.
So we have Mitch Trubisky. I knew that they messed up in the Mahomes draft.
And that was a different general manager before Poles took
and that's
over.
what I also thought as well.
Yes.
But now you're on Justin Fields, and it's like, okay, who was in the Justin Fields class that would make you ultimately regret kind of taking Justin Fields, right? Zach Wilson, dud. Trey Lance, probably a dud. Mac Jones, lost a starting job. Kyle Trask, who is he? Kellen Mond, I don't know who you are. David Mills got replaced by Bryce Young already, right? No, not Bryce Young.
C.J. Stroud.
I get them mixed up. And so really, in the Justin Fields draft class, Trevor Lawrence was the only quarterback that you'd say, okay, this guy was probably better than Fields. Well, guess what? The Bears had the 11th pick, and the Jaguars had the number 1 pick. That's why they got Trevor Lawrence. I don't think that he should be ultimately determined by this because he inherited a situation that he's trying to make better. And so I think that the only thing, ultimately that could really mess you up is, are you going to ride out with someone else's decision, or are you going to take charge of the situation of your own and potentially go out and get a different quarterback? I don't think that this is a make or break decision in terms of his job security. I still think it's a big decision overall, obviously, but I don't think it should jeopardize his job security just because he inherited this whole situation, right? He is trying to make it better. Had he drafted, everything else along this process, of course I would say yeah. But I think because he inherited a lot of this mess, I'm giving him more leeway.
I get what you're saying, but what piggybacks into this is he was in charge last year, and they traded the number 1 overall pick last year. And if, when you do that, especially if you trade the number 1 overall pick a second year in a row,
it's a good point,
and it doesn't work out, then you're setting yourself up for, you're going to be judged pretty quickly.
And then it doesn't help that you see Houston make the playoffs,
right?
with one of those traded picks,
right? Exactly, and that's This has to work out. Whatever he does, whether it's sticking with Justin Fields or sticking with the pick and trading Justin Fields, it's got to work out. Like, again, I don't think it's quite do or die for him just yet, but it needs to pan. Like it does. What I'm saying is, it doesn't have to pan out this season or even next season, but by 2 years from now. But by 2 years from now, they've got to be, especially in the shape that division is in, and the fact that Detroit has come back, the way they are right now, they've got to be in the mix within a couple of years.
So let me ask you as a follow-up question: if you are Mr. Poles, are you drafting a new quarterback or are you sticking with Fields?
I think I'm drafting a new quarterback.
Drafting a new quarterback.
Here's what I heard Mel Kiper say today. Like Mel Kiper, when he looks at Fields and Williams, he thinks it's really close, just in terms of the level of talent and whatever else they have. So what Mel Kiper said was, if you can get a really good haul for that number 1 pick, you trade the pick. Like if you can get a couple of first-round draft picks and, whatever else is going to come with, if you can get that big haul that apparently, like the Bears said a couple of weeks ago that they needed to trade that number 1 pick. He said, if you can get that, you trade the pick, but otherwise just take that pick and trade Justin Fields, basically.
That's true.
And I would subscribe to that.
So here's how I kind of think about it. Fields and Williams are so similar. I think you have to go with Williams because it's a fresh look. It looks like you're trying something new. And so what's really and it
resets the whole organization.
That's what I mean. It resets everything.
If you're judging Ryan Poles, it resets everything, and it gives you, you've got a franchise quarterback, and it gives you more time basically to get everything else in place. I think it completely makes more sense. But Fields came in here a couple of years ago, and he was supposed to be the savior too.
Right, exactly. And so that's the one side of it, and then the other side would be just what you kind of alluded to. If you can get a haul that bolsters your offensive line and gives you more dynamic weapons that helps Justin Fields out, I think that's the other option as well. But when you draft Williams, and if you believe the talent gap isn't that big, then it's worth the roll of the dice to me because it resets that timer essentially of when basically the fans are going to be fed up with you, because if you roll with Fields and he has another bad season, they're going to be fed up with you. But if you draft Williams and you roll the dice and he's probably, just as good as Fields or maybe a little bit better or maybe a little bit worse, it gets them off your back because at least you're trying something new. You're rolling with, a different option.
Right. Anthony says, not an NFL guy, but it seems to me the Bears' problems are in the front office. I think it's more ownership. Like the McCaskies are not as out front as Jerry Jones, but I think it starts with the ownership. And DK, this is kind of, I probably phrased it poorly. He said, shape of the division, Green Bay slaughtered the Cowboys and the Lions went to the conference championship.
How about that Cowboys?
And that's
and
my
Lions
point.
game?
Like they're getting passed up by the Lions is what I'm saying. They had an opportunity to be in contention this year because it was thought to be a down year when you're replacing Aaron Rodgers and going with Jordan Love. And here they are sinking even farther back. And now those two teams, the Packers stay at the top and the Lions are up there at the top as well. And that's kind of that's what I meant is like they're getting passed up now and they're no farther ahead than what they were coming into this year. Does that make sense? Did I?
Yeah, DK just struck a nerve. I got to talk a little crap right now.
So Mike Golick Jr. has an idea to stop court storming in college sports. That's been a big topic this week after Wake Forest and Duke. Golick said on his Gojo show that the solution is to give everyone in the crowd free food. Quote, you've got to speak the love language of drunk college people, and the love language of drunk college people is free food. What will get students to self-police each other? The prospect of free drunk food. End quote from Mike Golick Jr. Do you buy or sell it, Jess?
I buy it, actually. And I want to answer this question and kind of open up another can that this question relates to. But I think what the whole court storming topic is one topic, and I think how you prevent court storming or how you distract from court storming is another topic. And listen, Golick is right on. How do you interest college, drunk college kids? You offer them more alcohol or free food. And so if you can do either of those things at the end of the game and say, hey, if you don't go, you don't storm the court and you walk through this gate, we'll hand you a free certificate to this or that, right? That's essentially all you would have to do. And so I do think that that's the way to look at it. You can't give out free money, right? Like you can't just be handing out money to people. But you can get someone to sponsor you.
Or Chick-fil-A or a bag of Taco Bell or whatever it happens to be.
You can easily get the local, Taco Bell on campus to sponsor that, and then everyone's walking in buying all this food drunk. It's a win-win. And so I do think if you're going to appeal to college students and deter them from court storming, free food and alcohol would be the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, like when I saw this, it took me back to my college days, and it's like, well, are they playing these games at 2 a.m.? Because if they were, then Shoney's would be, like that's where we used to go. Like Shoney's had this breakfast buffet at 2 a.m. After everyone was done with the night, and it's it's like there's not really does Mike's Patio, do they do I think they do the 2 a.m. breakfast and stuff like that around here, don't they? But that's what you need. Just, whoever it is, I think that it could potentially go a long way. I think there's something to it. I don't know how drunk they all are, for a 6 o'clock college basketball game or a 2 p.m. college basketball game, but I get his point. And it's just a matter of getting fans conditioned for something else. Several years ago, Notre Dame women's basketball used to do if they get to 100 points, you get a free Big Mac or something.
It's what the Cavs do every home game.
Yeah. And, it's like if after a win, I don't know if it's the key is going to be you're only storming the court after a big significant win, like Duke or Kansas or, Kentucky. Whoever it, those kind of teams, that's when you get the court storming typically, if you pull off a big upset. So getting the, the fans in the frame of mind that if you do it, you're going to get this, and then keep them off the court. And the other side of it is just have better security. I mean, I think that would help as well. There's got to be something better they can do to keep fans off the court. At the end of
the day. This leads into my other question. I was upset because I'm sure you and Vince hit this topic on Monday. Are you opposed to the court storming? Do you not like the court storming?
We actually didn't talk about it Monday. I had added it, and then I didn't get it in there before we wrapped up because we had gone so long. I'm on the fence like this. I typically like the court storming just because it is such a big part of college sports. It's basically where you see it now, and the students get involved. I realize that there are, that the players can get hurt, and it is kind of crazy though that all of a sudden this Duke player is not hurt nearly as bad as they were leading everybody to believe right away.
Oh, that's what I mean.
The other side of it is, and I'll let you go right after this. Mad Dog on First Take today. I don't know if you heard any of his rant, but he brought up an excellent point. Duke has been complaining, and Coach K has been complaining, and Shire all week about, the court storming at Wake Forest. When Duke football beat Clemson in week 2 or whenever it was, and all the, 10 times more Duke fans stormed the football field after that than Wake Forest fans who stormed the court the other day. Coach K wasn't complaining about that, and John Shire wasn't complaining about that. They had no problem with that, So
it's so subjective. You only care because you lost.
Yeah,
and the Stork Corming went against you. And what I got to add to this is the Duke guy flailed and flopped. I thought he kind of was not looking for contact, but he wasn't going out of his way to get off the court type situation. And I don't think and the whole limping off and needing guys to carry him, I guarantee he plays in the next Duke game. I guarantee he plays in the next Duke game. And so I thought it was completely overblown and exaggerated. I think you can be safer about it, But listen, you can't get subjective. You can't get subjective about when it's a good time to rush the court, because it's only good when you win, and you're never going to say no. We shouldn't storm the court in a big win. And so I think it's a bunch of crock in my opinion, because I think that like are there more court stormings now than probably 10 years ago? Sure. I think as fans, people think just like winning a game almost deserves a court storming. I think court storming should be and field storming, whatever type of storming you're doing should be reserved for big wins. I'm talking like huge underdog type wins or a huge rivalry type win.
Yeah, the problem is you can't legislate that to fans.
Exactly.
Like, fans
and so I think that's,
especially
again,
college
so
students,
subjective.
they're looking for something to celebrate, which, like going back to Golik's thing, it's like, celebrate the food. Just let them know there's free food if you keep your butt off the court, So
right.
I think it's not a bad idea if you can figure out a way to get it implemented. Just make sure they know, like put it up on your jumbotrons, free, stay off the court and you're going to get a free hamburger or chicken sandwich or whatever it happens to be, So I think that there's something to it. I think that schools
a beer and a chick sandwich to go.
There you go.
A happy meal.
Can't be that hard. And I mean, college students typically poor, like looking for food. They're always up for some free food. So former Atlanta Falcons quarterback Matt Ryan says he should be in the Hall of Fame. Do you buy or sell Matt Ryan as a Hall of Famer?
I think if you let Matt Ryan in, you got to let Phillip Rivers in.
In that case, it's a definite no, because I don't
to me, this is like the ultimate. This is like the Charles Barkley argument, in my opinion. Like a really good individual player, but never, and has a ton of great stats and all of these things, but never had, the success. And they blew the Super Bowl. Everyone knows that. And so, like statistically speaking, yeah, I do think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. But again, I don't know if his statistical success can outweigh the lack of team success, no Super Bowls, etc. That, and he also had Julio Jones. Like they were the best quarterback wide receiver combination for, I don't know how long, but I just felt like he was a stats guy. He put up good stats, but never won the big games. And so I just think that ultimately I have to say no, because he didn't do enough outside of just stats.
People will say, and I've heard it brought up, well, Dan Marino, he never, like Dan Marino put up all these numbers in an era where no other quarterback was putting up numbers like Dan Marino was putting up. That's why he's in the Hall of Fame. He was, without a doubt, a great, and they just couldn't put a team around him as his career went on. He started off getting to the Super Bowl, but by the time he made them competitive for a long time. And really until the last couple of years, they haven't been competitive since Dan Marino retired. And when you look at Matt Ryan, I'm sorry, he's played in an era where everyone was throwing the ball, and like 3,500 yards a season is the floor, for a decent quarterback. And you're up around 4,000 yards for the most part. Like Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, I'm sorry, they're like you said, those guys are stat compilers. They never won big games. They're really good quarterbacks, but they are not among the greatest to ever play the game. And they don't belong. Neither one of them belongs in the Hall of Fame, I don't think. They didn't win championships. That's what you're judged by ultimately as a quarterback, is winning championships.
Yeah, and as much as it pains me to say, I think Eli Manning belongs in the Hall of Fame because of what we're talking about. He didn't have the personal stats, but he won his team some Super Bowls that they shouldn't have won. And I think that should outweigh all of the stats.
And he did it both times against the greatest team of his era. Like, how can you argue against that? I'm sure some will, but
listen, like I said, being a Cowboys fan and seeing those Giants teams win Super Bowls, and they beat the Cowboys in one of those playoffs to go to the move along to the Super Bowl. So like, I don't like saying it, but Eli Manning was a great quarterback, and he belongs in the Hall of Fame.
So the Carolina Panthers just raised their ticket prices by 4% after finishing with a 2-15 record last season. Charles Barkley is on record saying professional teams that don't make the playoffs or finish with a below 500 record should not be able to raise their ticket prices the following season. Do you buy or sell it?
I completely buy this. And I do think it's absurd when crappy teams raise their prices. Like, what for what? What have you rewarded us with as fans?
Right.
What have you done for us as fans by just continuously putting out bad products? Why should I have to pay more to come? I should be getting it at a discount, to be honest with you. You should be paying me to come to these games, essentially.
That's exactly right.
Because of how, like, if you're a Pistons fan, how are you going to those games? They're like 9-50. You know what I mean? Like, what is drawing you in at that point? The Pistons should not be allowed to raise season ticket prices next year for that reason. They suck. Like, why should I pay more to watch sucky basketball?
Yeah. You should be offering 2-for-1 tickets is what you should be doing. You shouldn't be raising ticket prices. Or if you're going to raise ticket prices, it's like, okay, you want to theoretically raise them, you should still be selling everyone or everything discounted 2-for-1. That's exactly right. I completely agree. And I think leagues should make this a rule. Like, you've at least got to finish 500 before you can raise your ticket prices the following year, because it shows that you're putting effort into actually putting a winning product on the field.
Because, I mean, there's owners out there, quite frankly, who don't care. I mean, they care, but they don't care much about – there's some owners who are all in on winning.
There's some who are just more interested in being owners and having that
making money
status symbol. Yeah. And yeah, exactly.
And so when I think of this as a Cubs fan, I get upset at the Ricketts family, and I know the Cubs have made the playoffs, and I know they've had above 500 seasons, but the Ricketts continue to raise prices every single season. And I would
because
say
they've got a tourist destination,
Yeah. But the only thing that makes me mad is if you're going to raise prices, then how are you not spending money in free agency, right? Like, right. I want to see that money going somewhere, right? You shouldn't just be raising prices to raise prices. And the final thing I'll say about this, though, is my one rebuttal or the caveat to this is we as fans have the power. If you don't want those prices to be raised, then don't buy tickets, because that's the reason why the Ricketts and every other owner can raise the prices, because us as fans are just going to continue to come and buy and buy and buy. And so you have to put your foot in the ground as a fan and say, I'm not going to do this if you're going to raise prices and put a bad product out there. You still have the power as the consumer at the end of the day.
Yep, that's exactly right. And that's why, like a couple of years ago when the Cubs were trading off all those young guys and not spending the money to re-sign them, I said the exact same thing, and I had a bunch of pissed off Cubs fans come at me on Twitter and it's like, oh, I'm never going again and all that, and like Cubs fans aren't going to go watch these games. And I said, they absolutely will. Watch at the end of the season. They're going to have one of the top 10 attendances in all of baseball. They do every year, and that's why Cubs ownership, and you talk about the Ricketts family specifically, that's why they can get away with not putting a product on the field, because they know people are going to come anyway. Now that's fairly specific to them. Not everyone can say that. But again, like back to the question, like when Theo was there as well, and they were obviously tanking for draft picks, and that's a completely different story. Like, I don't think we've seen it with the exception of the 76ers and Theo's Cubs. I don't think we've seen it to that degree where they were obviously tanking to try to get draft picks to try to turn their organizations around. But, that's like how that would, you know what I'm saying? Like if that is the organizational model and you're doing it with the intention, to try to get picks and be better down the road, you definitely should not be raising ticket prices at the same time.
So let me ask you this.
Well, good faith for your fans for the future.
I think if you're tanking, then I think if you're tanking, you should lower prices. But on the flip side, as you get better, I'm okay with those prices going back up, tiering back up. Yeah. Because it all levels out. We paid the price when they were bad, right? Like we're basically paying market value for how good they are. So if they're bad, I should get a discount, right? Which is down here. And then if they're good in a couple of years, the prices are up here. Well, that levels out to the middle in the end, right? And so I think that's you have to kind of look at it as a fair market, but that's not how it's going to be, and it'll never be that way.
Anthony's obviously not watching that much baseball. He says Epstein isn't with the Cubs anymore. No, it's been about, 4 or 5 years, I think, since he's been gone.
Yeah.
He's actually, I think I saw a couple weeks ago, the Red Sox were looking
He's
at.
back in with the Red Sox.
Yeah, he's back in with the Red Sox now. He had been with Major League Baseball for the last couple of years.
He's part owner of Fenway Sports Group.
Yeah, Anthony, you got to remember, it's been almost 8 years since they won the World Series.
Yeah, and they were very disappointed that they didn't get another World Series out of that window, and that's kind of where he got let go.
Yep. TJ, you are working towards getting yourself banned from this show.
I forgot I had power. I should have just immediately removed him.
That's right.
The Patrick Creighton game is what we'll refer to this one as.
DK says, "Why are the Cowboys ticket prices tickets so pricey? They haven't won.
They win divisions,
but they've at least won. Like again,
they go to the playoffs.
This is what We're not saying that, like, as Cowboys fans, we're settling for that. And I know you're kind of being a little facetious here, but the question was, they have to at least make the playoffs. They have to at least finish 500 or make the playoffs. They're at least making the playoffs. So they're putting a competitive product in the field. They're just not winning once they get to the playoffs. That's obviously the bigger picture. Couple extra questions I wanted to get in here. Indy Sailor. SEC and the Big Ten pushing for 4 guaranteed spots in the playoffs. They're probably setting the ask high, trying to get a lesser amount. Do you think they're going to get any more spots ultimately?
No. And it just sounds like they're basically saying our conferences have the biggest and the best teams, so we deserve more spots at the table. I think with it, you'll have to see this playoff format go for a few years before any changes are made.
Yeah. I think so as well. I think it's a few years down the road before you see any real expansion coming. Sailor was also asking, he said the Cover 3 podcast saying that if Florida State wins and is able to move, they will quickly move to the SEC, Notre Dame to the Big Ten. This seems unlikely to me. What do you think? Just because Florida State goes to the SEC is like every time someone flips to a conference, everyone thinks, oh, now Notre Dame's going to the Big Ten. No, I don't. Notre Dame has a TV contract with NBC for the next 5 years. There is nothing I don't think that is going to happen. Well, I won't say it that definitively. I'll just say this. Florida State moving to the SEC is not going to trigger Notre Dame going to the Big Ten because the ACC without Florida State is still going to be in place. Florida State's only been decent the last couple of years. It's not like they've been the flagship program of the ACC by any means. And it's not like if they could get to the SEC, they would be there already. So that's not going to trigger Notre Dame's move to the imminent move to the Big Ten.
No, nothing is going to trigger Notre Dame to the Big Ten. This is everyone's favorite thing to say. Notre Dame's got to go to the Big Ten when this happens. Like it's a cause and effect type situation. And the effect is Notre Dame also leaving. Listen, it's just not going to happen. Notre Dame is going to remain independent for a very long time until the NCAA or the college football committee specifically takes something away for them or limits what they can do since they're not in a conference. But they can get everything they want out of a conference. And again, everyone's favorite thing to say is, oh, Notre Dame needs to join a conference because of this or this or this. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. So as people are chiming in with this 14-team playoff model, I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but the SEC and the Big Ten are pushing hard for this. Like, I know there's a lot of different things that can happen. I know there's talk about if they don't get what they want, they could sort of split and do their own thing. I think they're pushing for this, but it still has to be voted on. And it doesn't have to be unanimous, but convincing the other commissioners to agree to it is going to be the key. Like, there's so much more that's going to happen. And like, to the question about Florida State to the SEC, I mean, this could ultimately be, what tips Notre Dame is like, if all this expansion, then the SEC and the Big Ten aren't getting what they want, how that forces Notre Dame's hand, I think is ultimately going to be much bigger than any one school, jumping to another conference. That's probably going to be it ultimately. All right. Well, that is going to do it for tonight. Now, I believe you and Vince are back tomorrow. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Vincenzo and I will be here since he has no excuses.
That's right. You guys will be here. I'll be doing Notre Dame versus Virginia Tech women's basketball over at Purcell. Hopefully a good game tomorrow night. Looking forward to that. Couple ranked teams. 2 games to go in the regular season for the Irish women. And we'll be back on Friday as well with a rapid fire show. So got shows for you the next couple of nights. Hit the like button before you leave if you would. And, of course, subscribe, rate, and review. Thanks for joining us tonight. And we will talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.
Have a great night, except